Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to another month and another webinar from the Power Platform webinar series from dbrownconsulting and all our partners. Right, so today we're going to be talking about secrets to improving your Power BI report with more advanced DAX.
All right, so welcome to this month's webinar. And then today we'll be talking about advanced DAX, just like David said. And this will be our agenda for today. So today we are going to talk about working with variables and also intro to DAX Studio and its usefulness. We also talk about understanding DAX query and how you can use summarize and add column functions in DAX query. And we also talk about altering filter context with DAX query. So a lot of people always ask, what is DAX query? What is DAX query? Okay, I'm going to explain that. A lot of people will be like, what is variable? I'm also going to talk about that as well. So basically, this is what we are going to be talking about today. Now, one of the important things that we should note is that before you can actually perfect your skills in DAX and you say, okay, I'm very, very good in that, you need to be able to get your hands on some resources like what I'm showing on my screen. There's a book called DAX Pattern. You can actually get that book. There's also a book called The Definitive Guides to DAX. I think I've read that by Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari. So that's a very good book as well that you can actually read to improve your skills very well on DAX. We also have Power Pivot and Power BI. That's a very good book as well. And the last one as well. So these are the resources you can actually get your hands on, and you can improve the way you actually write your DAX. So these books are something you should actually get used to. So today I'll also be talking about working with variables. So a lot of people actually just get into Power BI and they start writing their DAX, right? So what they do is they just get to the Power BI and they start writing their DAX, and then they don't know that you can actually use something called variable to be able to improve the way you write your DAX. Just for example, some people can write like 4 to 5 DAX to be able to achieve a goal, right? So you want to solve a particular problem. So you need to now write 4, 5, 6 DAX, right? So when you are writing 4, 5, 6 DAX, that will actually affect the performance of your report. But with variable, you can actually write just a single DAX that will have all those your 5 to 6 DAX inside one DAX. Right? So variable is very, very important when you want to improve the performance of your report, and also when you want to improve the kind of insight you want to get from your data. So that takes me to explaining introduction, maybe like an important of variable, the advantage of using variables, right? So variable is very good for a reusable code. So when you actually set a variable inside a DAX, you can actually reuse it even inside the same DAX. And then it will be very easy for you to do some other kind of, I want to divide this, I want to do this. That's one. Then two, performance. So just like I said before, it will improve the performance of your report, because when you have a long list of DAX, right? You have like 15 DAX, and you can actually put all those 15 DAX inside one single DAX, right? So variable allows you to do that. So it will improve the performance of your report. It is very easy to write and maintain, right? Because when you have your DAX in one place, you can easily go there. When you have an error, you want to change something, you can easily go to there and maintain that DAX somehow. But when you have your DAX scattered around, you have like 5 different DAX to achieve something. You now need to go to your Anchor, change something in your Anchor, go to your time intelligence functions or DAX, change something there, go to your variance, change something there. But when you have everything in the same place, so it is very easy for you to maintain and then easy to use. Now, very easy for users to read and interact with. Variable is also extremely very easy to use, right? And for user to read and interact with, because user can actually go there, look at your functions, they will see the way you lay down your formulas and see, okay, so this is what this person is trying to say here. This is what this person is trying to say here. So for those that use Python as well, we have something in, we have a variable in Python that you can also reuse as well in Python. So that's variable. So we're going to talk about this variable today. In fact, I'm just going to go into a demo before I go to the next slide. So just show you how variable is and how you can actually use a variable. So I have a report I've created in the past. I'm just going to show you that report and then some other report, other DAX that I've written inside that report. So if you look at this report, you notice that I have different things here. I have my month-to-month percentage change by year. I have different things inside this report. But before I can actually achieve this month-to-month percentage change, some people need to write like 3 DAX to be able to do this. The first DAX they will write is something called anchor. We call that anchor. So anchor is like something that actually anchor all of that report, right? So like you want to sum up your revenue. So they will sum up their revenue first. After summing up those revenue, they will put that DAX in one side. Now they will write another time intelligent DAX to say, okay, I want to know my month-to-month percentage change. And to be able to know that, that means you need to know your last year as well. What is your performance last year? So you now sum your revenue last year, use calculate functions. I'm sure some of us are familiar with calculate. So use calculate functions, you now check your last year. So after you get your last year, that's another measure on its own, making 2. So you now write another one, which is the third one, and that's your month-to-month percentage, like your variance, right? So you now write another one, making 3 DAX, right? So for this particular report too, I also wrote those 3 DAX because I'm guilty of that. I wrote those 3 DAX. But with variable, I can actually put those 3 DAX into one simple measure, right? So if you look at this, my reports that I have on my screen, I can even go to report 2. You can see my month-to-month percentage change that I have here. I have my month-to-month percentage change here. So let me remove this month-to-month percentage change that I wrote inefficiently and write the same thing with just one simple DAX, right? One simple DAX, just a variable, right? So I'm going to come here. We are familiar with the way we write DAX. So I'll come to my fact sales, right? Click and say new measure, right? New measure. So this measure that I want to write now, I want to write it very efficient because I'm putting everything, all those 3 measures that I mentioned, I want to put it in the same DAX, right? So I'm going to call this month-to-month percentage change 2 because I've wrote one before. Just go percentage change 2. Let me put underscore here. So month-to-month percentage change 2, right? So this is what I want to write. This is what I want to write. Now, remember I said in the last measure that I wrote, right? I actually use like 3 measures to be able to achieve my month-to-month percentage change. But for this one, percentage variance. But for this one, I'm just going to write everything in a single DAX, right? Everything in a single DAX, right? So the first thing I'm going to write is my this year, right? You know, I need to write this year. I also need to write last year before I can now do the comparison that says, okay, divide my this year by my last year, -1. That's the percentage, right? To do this year, then I need to write a function of this year. So there's something called var, and that's variable. When I type var like this, look at this, var. It's not like a measure because when you type, you know, when you type a measure, you see different measures there. But this is not like a measure. This is a variable, right? This is something that keep your measures somewhere for you to be able to reuse it, right? So I type var right now. So var, after typing var, so DAX understand that I actually want to put a measure somewhere. So now I want to write my this year, or let me call it total sales, right? Total sale is what I want to write. Total sales. Total sales is what I want to write. And the measure for this year, which is the total sales, is just simply my anchor, just to sum up my revenue, my sales, or my value. So I'll just say, okay, I want to sum my fact sales table. So this is my fact sales table down here. I just want to sum up the revenue. So let me say I want to sum my fact sales revenue, which is this one, right? Then I'll close my bracket. So this is the first variable that I just wrote. Now, this calculation is not doing anything. I just wrote a variable that just take something and just hold it somewhere. So that's the first measure. I'm also going to write another one that says, okay, I also want to write last year. I've wrote my first year. No, last year I also want to write that. So I'll call that revenue last month, right? Let me do last month, not last year. So because I'm actually comparing this in the month table. So last month, right? Let me do last month. So in my last month, what I'm writing basically is just, I just want to do a calculate. For those that are familiar with DAX very well, you know, when you are writing your time intelligence formula, calculate is part of the function that is very, very efficient to use, right? When you are writing a time intelligence formula. So I'm going to write a function called calculate. I'm calculating what? I'm calculating my total sales, but let me still write my sum. Let me say, okay, I don't want to use my variable yet. So sum, I want to sum my revenue. Sum my revenue. So this is what I'm calculating. And then based on a filter, so calculate actually come with two things, expression and a filter. So my expression is that my fact sales revenue, right? And the filter is what? So the filter is basically going to be my previous month, because I want to calculate my previous month, right? So I can either decide to write this here or just go a bit step down, right? So previous month, then I'll pick that from my D calendar date, right? Then I'll close my bracket. Right? So this is another variable. So I've wrote two variables inside one DAX. The first variable is my this year. The second variable is my last year. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, after you complete a variable, you need to now type something called return to be able to use that variable in any calculations that you want, right? So return is my final, it's like a final text you're going to type to be able to return something. So, okay, after using all this beautiful variable, now I want to return this. I want to be able to return this. Now, what do I want to return? I want to return my, okay, so sorry, I didn't close my bracket for calculate. That's why my return is showing error. So I want to return to just one thing. I just want to divide. I want to do a percentage variance, right? And you know, the formula of a percentage variance is just your actual divided by your budget minus 1. So this year minus divided by last year minus 1, right? That's just a simple measure. So I can easily even use a divide function. So there is a function called divide. So I can use the divide function that says, okay, I want to divide my total sales. And now look at this. This thing that you're looking at here is my variable. You can see the way it's showing is different from some other measures, right? Let me type in. So once I type total, so you can see the way measures are showing, right? And you can see the way variables is showing. It's showing XY, right? You can see that. So that's variable. My total sales divided by my revenue LM. So I'm going to type my revenue LM2. Let's see how that's going to come up. Revenue LM. Can you see that? So that's also a variable. It's showing XY. Revenue LM, like this. Close my bracket, then minus 1. Then minus 1. So this is just my percentage variance. Total sales, comma, revenue LM minus 1. Then I'll press enter. This is me writing 3 measures inside one, right? 3 measures inside one. Now let me use these measures to see how it's going to look like in my report. Okay, so interesting. Let me format it in percentage. Let me just format this to percentage. So interesting. So you can see this actually come out well in my report, and I can see everything. But I still have some things here. I have minus 100 where there is no data. Right? So, and then I still have minus 100% at the top here. So I can remember I said that one of the advantage of my variable is that it's easy to maintain. You can actually go there and go and maintain it nicely. It's easy to maintain, right? So this minus 100 I don't want. I only want to do this percentage variance when this and this is present. When my this year and last year is present, that is when I want to do my percentage variance. That's when I want to do the variance. So I have to some kind of add some condition inside that my formula. Add a little bit of condition inside the formula and say, if this guy and this guy is available, that is when you should do the divide. If they are not available, then don't do the divide, right? So I can easily go back to my measure and just come here and say, okay, so this is my return. I want to add something to it. I want to add if functions and say, if total sales and revenue LM is available, then I want you to do this. I can decide to use an ampersand, which is and, but I can also use a Boolean logic, which is and, right? I can say and say if total sales, which is that my variable, remember this variable, this total sales, comma, the one last year, which is the other variable, revenue LM, this one is available. I'll close my bracket. That simply means if you see this and this, if you see this and this, then do the divide. I'll put a comma. Then do the divide. That is what my if is doing. If you see this guy and this guy, then do the divide. If not, if I come here, I can say to put a comma here. You know, if is asking for result if false. I've done the result if true, which is this one. Now, if I put a comma, result if false, is going to, maybe I want to put 0. If it's not available, then put 0. Oh, I don't need to put anything. Let me say, just close the bracket, give me blank. So if it's not available, just blank. Then let me enter. Let's see the way our formula is going to come up now. All right. Interesting. So you can see this. You can see all those minus 100 is no longer there, because whenever these two and these two is available, that's when I want you to do something, right? And you can see that my formula is now very, very efficient and is looking nice. And I was able to do this inside one formula. So I don't write up to 3 things to be able to achieve this. Another one that I may show you, but because of my time, what if I want to achieve something like these two cards that I can see on my screen here? So I want to do a percentage difference on these 2 cards. So look at these 2 cards. I have parts this year and parts last year. Some people may want to actually bring out parts like that and just put it in a card and do some kind of calculation on it to be able to see their percentage difference. So I want to do a percentage difference of parts, right? And then I just want to do that in a single measure. I want to do that in a single measure. And you know, when you want to write your part last year alone, your part, to be able to bring out this part last year, look at this part, this particular part alone, to be able to bring it out, you're going to write a lot of complex arts to be able to bring it out, because you need to actually filter your DLOB table, which is where the part is coming from. You also need to now bring out part from there, do another formulas that will do same period last year and bring out that particular stuff from it. And you now return whatever you want to do, right? So that may look too complex as well, right? But it's something we can write. It's something we can write. Let's say I want to actually write my part last year. For some people to achieve this, it's stressful. They can write like 2 or 3 formulas to be able to do that. But let me just do mine in a very fast way so that you can see how efficient variable is, right? So what I want to write here is just my parts last year. Part LY, right? Part last year is what I want to write. I just want to bring out parts last year. What I'm going to do, remember our var, VAR, that's a variable. And then the first thing I'm going to write is my LOB. So the first thing is just my LOB, just to bring out parts, right? To bring out parts is not actually easy, right? When you're writing this kind of formula, it's not easy. It's different from just doing a small calculator and just say, okay, when this is equals to part, no. So to bring out parts last year, to bring out just part, I'm going to say LOB. So let me bring out LOB set, or let me just call it LOB parts, right? LOB part is what I want to bring out. And to bring out something from a table, right, what you need is a filter function. I'm not sure whether we have all used a filter function. A filter function is something that is very efficient in DAX that you need to use. It's a very cool DAX that a lot of people like to use. So if I do a filter function, so you see that this is what filter does. So filters return a table that has been filtered. It returns a table that has been filtered. So I want to return something from my DLOB. So I have a table called DLOB, and that table has all my line of business, and I want to pick just part from that DLOB. So I'm going to use a filter. And the filter that I'm going to use, I want to filter is asking for a table, right? So which table do you want to filter? Then I'm going to put my expression. So I can say I want to filter DLOB, but not just DLOB that I want to filter, because I just want this thing to return all the line of business in the DLOB. I want it to return all the line of business. So I can't just use filter and then a table. So that means I need a function called haul, right? I need a function called haul, right? So with a function called haul, then I can now bring my DLOB column here. DLOB. Let me see. Then I cannot bring my DLOB. Let me see the name of my table. Okay, there is an underscore. So D underscore LOB, and then DLOB LOB. Because that's the column I want to bring, right? That is it. Then I'll close my bracket for all. So this will return all the table. It will not filter it. It will return all the line of business, they don't filter it. Then after this return all the line of business. Now I want you to now pick part from the line of business. Part from the line of business. So I'll just do my D underscore LOB again, and say when this is equals to part. When this is equals to part, just part, right? Then let me close my bracket. And this is just me bringing out just LOB part from that table. Some people, when they want to write this kind of measure, they will write it somewhere first, just to bring out the part. They will write it somewhere. Now, another variable is now the last year variable. You know, what I'm doing, right, is different. I'm not just writing last year for all the LOB. I'm writing last year for just part, right? So now, I'm going to now do a function that say, okay, so give me the last year for part. So I can just say, same period last year. Give me same period last year of the calendar date. Same period last year of the calendar date. That's my last year, right? That's my last year. Now, I will now come here and return something. So what I want to return is now, I want you to calculate my revenue based on parts and also based on last year, right? Based on parts and also based on last year. And remember, when you want to return a variable, you hand a variable with a return, right? So I want you to calculate my, let me just say my revenue last year or something. So revenue, just my revenue, calculate my fact sales revenue, calculate my fact sales revenue, and then based on what? Based on a filter. So I'm now putting a filter. So calculate fast sales revenue based on parts. So you pick part first from that table. You pick fast based on my parts, right? Part. And remember what I call that variable. So I call it LOB part, right? Based on parts. That's one. And once you filter by part alone, I also want you to filter by last year. So I'm going to put LY here. LY. Then I'll close my bracket. Now I have successfully wrote a part last year. So let me just click enter. I successfully, the same part last year is available. So let me just call this 2. I think I've wrote it before. So let me just call this underscore 2. So I have successfully wrote part LY last year, right? Part LY last year. So now it's easy for me to now say, okay, I want to combine my part last year with my part this year. Right? I want to compare my part last year with my part this year. It's now easy that way, right? It's easy that way. So now say, okay, let me compare this. In fact, I can even change this guy to, let me just bring this guy into a page first so that you can see it. Let me bring my part LY last year here. So let me bring it down here. My part last year. This is it. And I'm going to bring like something like a filter and select maybe a year. And then I think this data is just 2014 and then 2015. And I'm going to select something. But this part last year, I'm just going to change it to percentage growth. So not just ordinary last year alone. So I want to see, okay, so what if I want to see the percentage growth? Instead of writing everything here, let me have it in terms of percentage growth, right? So I can change this to part growth, not just last year. Right? So, and to change it to growth, I'm just going to divide something. You need to divide something to be able to have that. Just divide something under my return. And what I'm dividing is just this year minus last year. This is already my last year. I've wrote my last year here. So I can now say, okay, let me divide this year. And what is my this year? Right? What is my this year? My this year is just going to be a function that just brings out parts. Just a function that brings out just parts. That's my this year. Just a function that brings out part. And we know that's very simple. You can do calculate you sum your fact sales revenue. You sum your fact sales revenue like this. Once you sum your fact sales revenue, you put a filter that says when DLOB is equals to PAT. That's how you bring out this here. When your DLOB is equals to PAT. Okay, sorry, I didn't close my bracket here. Comma. When my DLOB is equals to PAT, just ordinary PAT. I close my bracket. So this is my this here. So this is just my this here. In fact, I can even put this here as a variable at the top before I use it in my function here, but I just decided to write it straight. So this is my this here. So calculate some fact sales when DLOB is equals to PAT. That's my this here. Let me put a comma, right? So I've put a comma here to say divide this year divided by last year, which is this one. Then remember, I need to close bracket for divide like this, and now say minus 1. And say minus 1. So once I do that, that is my PAT growth. This function is extremely simple. So the way people look at it, they say, okay, this is not really coming up the way I want it. So the way people look at it, this function is extremely simple. It's just easy, right? So I decided to write PAT growth now, and this is PAT growth. This is just me dividing this guy by this guy. It's nothing complex. It's nothing complex. So that is me using variable, right? Variable. And remember, this is advanced DAX. So that's me using variable. Another thing I would like to introduce to you guys is something called DAX Studio. DAX Studio. So how many of us have heard of DAX Studio? Can we type in chat? How many of us have heard of DAX Studio? Can we type something in chat? How many of us have heard of DAX Studio? How many of us have heard of DAX Studio and DAX Query? How many of us have heard of that? Just type yes or no in chat. Let me see if you would have heard of DAX Studio or DAX Query. Let's type in chat. How many of us have heard of it? Okay. All right. So DAX Studio is actually a tool, right? It's an ultimate tool for working with DAX queries, right? So when, some of us work with SQL very well. You write a query on SQL and MDX. So DAX Studio is part of the DAX of DAX a DAX tool that can allow you to write a DAX query effectively. And it's also allow you to format your DAX really effectively. You don't need to travel to DAX formatter before you can actually format your DAX nicely. You can do that in DAX Studio. And then it's efficient for DAX query. That's what most people use it for. It's an ultimate tool for working with DAX queries. And what's DAX queries? So DAX query is just you trying to create a table, querying a database and bringing out a table. For those that are familiar with Power Query very well, you know what Power Query does is that you query a database and you now manipulate it somehow for you. You can actually do the same thing with DAX. You can actually query a table and just bring out some things out from that table. So we are going to use DAX also to query some of our database and bring some insight out from that database. Some reports actually need you to query the database, have some structured table first before you now create your own personal report. So I'm going to jump into the demo and show you what DAX query look like and what DAX Studio is, right? So let me open DAX Studio on my system. All right. So this is DAX Studio. Okay, we can't see my second screen. I'll just show you that. So DAX Studio is asking me to connect to my Power BI or wherever report I want to connect to. That's what DAX Studio is telling me to do, right? But I'm just going to connect to that now so I can share it on your screen, right? So I've connected to that. So this is my DAX Studio you can see on my screen. So this is DAX Studio. What you can see on my screen now is DAX Studio. And remember I said DAX Studio is efficient for DAX query, right? It's efficient for DAX query. And DAX query is you querying your table. And DAX query can actually be created using a three general approach, right? It can be created using three general approach. You can either use a DAX new table in Power BI. In Power BI, you can do you can try to go to your modeling tab here. You will see new table. Let me expand this. Let me expand this so you can see it very well. Now look at this. Do you see this new table? This new table. When you click on new table in Power BI, you are creating a query, a DAX query. That's what you are doing. You're creating a DAX query. You can either do that by come here and just do new table, or use DAX Studio, which is the DAX Studio that I'm showing you. You can either use this DAX Studio, or you can also use SQL Server Management Studio. For those that are familiar with SQL very well, you can also use SQL Server Management Studio to do this. But for me, I want to use DAX Studio. Right? That's what I want to use for today. And DAX Studio, when you're using DAX Studio, if you're using a new table, you can actually do new table and start writing your DAX. That's simple. But for DAX Studio, anytime you want to query a table, you need a function called evaluate. Evaluate is extremely important. You can write it down somewhere. You need to write evaluate first before you actually start querying any table. Evaluate must be there. And if I type evaluate now, did you see this evaluate? Evaluate. So this is evaluate. So evaluate is just getting me ready to be able to query anything. Now, let me just query my fact sales table first. I'm not doing any filter. I'm not doing any summarization. I'm not creating any special table. I just want to return all my fact sales. So if I say evaluate my fact sales table, I actually have a fact sales table somewhere. Yeah, I think I have a fact sales table somewhere. So let me just type that here. So just like I said, we are using a DAX table. So evaluate is extremely important to be able to query your table. It's extremely important. Now, let me say, okay, I want to evaluate my fact sales just to see all the table in my fact sales. We do this a lot in SQL. For those that are familiar with queries in SQL. So just like you do your select star, you know, when you do in SQL, you do select star from this table. It's the same thing, right? It's just that what this thing is doing is different. Now, when you've typed what you want to type, you can actually run it. Now, I want to evaluate just fact sales. I'll come here and just run it. You can see query has started. And immediately, it's returned my query, which is all the table, all the columns inside fact sales table. You can either come up here and run it, or just press F5. F5 is also the shortcut to run a query, to run this query. Now I've run this query just by pressing F5. And that's the first thing, right? I just show you what evaluate can do, right? So now I've evaluated my fact sales. At the top here, you can see format query. Format query. So it's always very good for you to format your DAX when you're writing it. So I can come here and say, remember I told you that DAX Studio is efficient for that query. When you're writing the DAX query, one of the best tools out there is DAX Studio, right? When you're writing a DAX query. So I can say, okay, I want to format my, in a short, I can do a short, and the control is Control F6. That's the shortcut. So I've just formatted this. Evaluate fact sales. Another thing I can do, for those that use SQL very well, I can also order this table to say, okay, I want you to start from the lowest revenue, right? I want you to order from the lowest revenue, right? So that when I look at my revenue, this is 164,160. This is 64,000 naira. This is 264. I want to see from the lowest revenue up to the highest. I want you to order by revenue, right? So I can come here and say, okay, let me just put another measures that order my revenue, right? So I'm just going to say order by. So there's a function called order by, right? So I want to order by my fact sales. I want to order by my fact sales revenue, right? That's what I want to do. I want to order by my fact sales revenue, right? So let me just put my revenue here and just close my bracket. Let me run my query. Oh, my fact sales is not coming up. So let me just do that again. Right. So order by, I want to order my fact sales by revenue, just fact sales revenue. So they've improved this guy a lot. So let me run this query. So my order by does not want to take open bracket. So sorry for that. So just like you do, say let's start from your SQL. So you can see immediately I do evaluate fact sales and order by revenue, you notice that this revenue has now been sorted and it started from the lowest, which is 120, 120, 120, 120, right? So that's me starting this query small. I know my time is fast spent. I have just like 6-7 minutes, but let me still show you some more things you can actually do with DAX. I can also say, okay, after you've ordered by this particular thing, I also want this my revenue to start from a particular number. That's another query. So to say, okay, instead of starting the revenue from the lowest, I want just for my revenue to start from, let's say, 1,000. I want you to start from 1,000. So I can do, there is a query also called start at, right? So I want you to start from 1,000. Let me see if this will go as a test. I want you to start from 1,000, right? Okay, this is not taking my 1,000 as a test. Let me just put this number and just run it. Now look at this. So start at 1,000. So now you can see my revenue start at 1,000. We do this query a lot when you want to take a table from a database. When a customer says, okay, we want you to work on our data, and what you want you to do is that we want you to start from 2010. We want you to start from 2019, or we want you to start from where the value is 1,000. You don't need to bring all the table from the database and start working on it. You can actually do a dash query that will bring a exact table that you want, put it in Power BI, and that's what you start your report with, right? So instead of you taking out the table and start doing your report, to improve the performance of report, create a dash query that says, bring this data, whatever the revenue starts from 1,000. You can start creating your report from there, right? So you can see that this revenue starts from 1,000. Now I'm querying my data small. I can also format this. Look at my DAX formatter. I can format it like this to say I want you to format my DAX nicely. And you see that this is some kind of formatter. So that's why it's not changing. Let me look at long line. So this is still some kind of formatted because I write it nicely with best practice. So now let me write another type of query. So I can say, some of us are familiar with creating our dimension with Power Query. So we like to create our dimension with Power Query. What if I want to create my dimension with DAX? Okay, I want to create my dimension with DAX. And if you look at my report very well, I have my dimension here already, so I may not be able to create a dimension. I will have bring a table to allow me to do that. But let me show you how you can actually bring a unique value. You say, okay, so I want to bring a unique value of something, right? I want to bring a unique value of something. Then it's so easy for me to do another type of report. So I can do a new query. Right? So what I did is just Control N. Let me cancel this. So this is query 1, right? So I can do a new query just to show you another demo. I can do Control N. This is Control N. This is telling me which report do you want to connect to. So I have just this open. Is it a tabular server? Is it a PBI, SSDT, or model? So it's just a PBI, right? Then I'll connect. Now what I'm writing here in my query 2, remember evaluate. Evaluate is just one of the formula you must not forget when you're writing a measure, right? Evaluate is extremely important, right? So I want to evaluate, I want to show you a unique value. So let's say I just want to bring out my store from my fact sales, right? So I can say all, I just want you to return all my fact sales. I want this thing to return all my fact sales store. That's what I want this thing to restore. All my fact sales. Okay, evaluate. Let me even open my bracket down here. So for best practice, and say this also go down. I want you to return all what? All fact sales. All fact sales. Evaluate does not want to take open bracket. So all fact sales. So I want to do all fact sales, and I'm bringing just the store. Right? So once you type the table name, right? Another thing I didn't mention, once you type a table name, your square bracket in front of P. Once you put that square bracket in front of P in front of your table name, then to give you access to now type all the columns inside that table. All the column inside that table. So what I want is my fact sales, I think fact sales store. I think I have store inside this thing. Until I have region. Let me see. I have fact sales store. Just put store. Let's see. And let me run this query. Okay. All right. Let me just run my all factors first. Let's see if my evaluate will fine for this. Yeah. Okay, so I can see this. Then I think from here, I can now say, let me pick just the store, right? So I just want you to return the store. And this store that I want you to return is going to be a unique store. Now look at this. Now this is very unique, right? But because we have much store, let me bring another one that says, okay, I want to bring maybe this time it should be line of business. Line of business. So I can see the unique line of business, right? And let me run this. So you can see I have just 4 unique line of business. By just doing evaluate all unique line of business, but I don't have much time. Let me just show you quickly the best stacks that you should actually write when you're using a query. So when you're using a query, it is efficient for you to always use summarize and add column. I've mentioned it in my query. Summarize and add column is something I mentioned in my introduction, that you should make use of summarize and add column a lot in your dash query, because when you are querying a table, summarize and add column is something that can easily work for you. But because of our time, I will only show summarize. I will show add column today, but we can actually have more session on dash query and then DAX Studio. So for this one, let me just do a new query and write it from a new query. And here, let me do a new query. So from my new query, I also want to evaluate again. Just want to evaluate, right? Then after my evaluate, I want to write a measure called summarize. Summarize. Let's bring it up. So I want to write a measure called summarize, right? Summarize is the measure that I want to write. Now, what do I want to summarize? I want to summarize different things. I want to summarize how you write stuff, how you write blah. But what I want to summarize, I want to see a model. So it's like I want to create a report myself. And I want to create a report that shows me model by the sum of model and also the transaction count for model. It's like I'm creating a report from here, right? So I want to say, okay, summarize fact sales table. So summarize is asking for what? It's asking for table first, right? It's asking for table first, but you have to be familiar with all these functions very well. It's asking for table first. Then after my table, what do you want to summarize? What column do you want to summarize inside that table? I want to summarize my fact sales. Let me use model this time. Model. Right? A comma. After all those model, if I want to summarize by a value, you want to summarize a value. That means you need to put that value, the name of that value you want to summarize by in quote first, in a text, you now put a measure in front of it. After my model, what I want to see in my total is my total revenue. So I'm going to put my total revenue in something like a text like this. Total revenue. Like a text like this. Then after you put that text, you put a comma again, you now put the measure you want to use for that summarize. I can say, okay, I want to do some, the measure I want to do is I want to sum my fact sales revenue. My fact sales revenue. My fact sales revenue is what I want to sum, right? Close my bracket for sum. I also want to see my transaction count, right? So I can put a comma here and say, put another test name for my measure. Test name for my measure. I want to do a transaction count. Close my bracket, comma again. And the measure for transaction count, I'm counting a table, right? So it will be perfect for me to use a function called count rows. Count rows, right? You see the way I'm writing this measure is getting long, but don't worry, I'm going to use a formatter. I have a formatter at the top here. Count rows, I want to count fact sales table. I close my bracket for count row and also close my bracket for summarize. Now I can come up here and say, I want you to format my DAX. Now look at it. Format query. You can also use Ctrl+6, remember, or F6. So you just formatted this. Evaluate, summarize my fact sales table by my fact sales model. Give me the total revenue and also the transaction count. So if I run this now with F5, let's see what you're going to give us. Now look at this. Total revenue is already giving me model, my total revenue, and my transaction count. So this is the table I can now bring to my report to say, okay, so this is the nice table I can now bring to my report. because I already know. So this is the list of all my model, their total revenue and their transaction count, right? I can decide to add like maybe LOB to this thing instead of model. So I also want to see LOB. So after this comma, I can say also give me fact sales, line of business, right? Then put another comma. And let me run this query. So can you see this query now? I have model, I have line of business, I have total revenue, I have transaction count. There's actually more to Dax query and Dax Studio, but because of our time, I may not be able to talk much. There's also calculate table that you can use. You can also use add column, just like I said. But I would stop here.
Wow, thanks a lot, Wally. That was a lot. That was a lot. That was a lot. And the variable, what is a variable? A variable is, I think I say, oh, you're declaring a variable. All you're saying is you're arranging people together. Maybe you need 5 people to do a certain work, right? So you've defined who the first person is, who's the second person, who's the third person, who's the fourth person, who's the fifth person. You can call that variables. And then your formula now is what you say return. Return the formula. I want person 1 plus person 2 divided by person 3 multiplied by person 4. Maybe that's your formula. But first you need to tell the system that, hey, these are the variables, or these are the people I'm working with. These are the formulas that will have a calculation that I'm now going to use together in my mega formula. So that's just it. In Excel, you see some people have if inside if inside if inside if inside VLOOKUP inside, very complex formula. Each of those you could say it's a variable. You could store each one of them and then now combine them together. It's just an easier way to see things. And then DAX Studio is a great way to write your DAX in a separate place and be seeing the results right there at the bottom. So you can see that on the screen right now, Wale was writing evaluate this formula, and then can you see results at the bottom? That's the result of the formula at the bottom. So it's a bit like the variable thing we said in DAX, but it's just showing you the results. And what you do is, if you're a DAX developer, which is what you would be if you're really into DAX, you would create these things in DAX Studio, test it out before you now carry the formula and go to Power BI desktop and use it. You're using DAX Studio to test things out, to make sure things are working, or evaluate why things are not working properly. Why is it so slow? Lots of stuff on DAX Studio. Right, so it's great. So DAX Studio is just a tool that was invented by, I can't remember his name right now, but a great guy. I think it's Jeremy. I can't remember. But anyway, the updates all free. But you definitely, if you're usually using Power BI, you need DAX Studio as one of your external tools. Thanks, Wale.
Thank you, David.
All right, so more questions. Any questions from the audience? You could ask your questions. I think Wale has a little bit more time left, just a few more minutes for Wale to go. So ask your questions, and please join our platform, our user groups. I don't know if you haven't joined the Telegram group. Maybe we'll share the link with you on chat right now to join the group. Please also click on the evaluation link at the top so we can evaluate our speaker. How do I connect to DAX Studio? Do you want to show that very quickly, how they can download DAX Studio and put it on? Maybe if you open your Power BI, you see external tools. Maybe you could show that. If you Google DAX Studio, you easily download. Yeah, just Google DAX Studio, then download it. Once you download it into your system, if you go to Power BI, you would see external tools. Wale, if you don't mind, can you go to Power BI? Okay, yeah, good. You've gone to DAX Studio. Great. Okay. So you see, just Google, this is the website, daxstudio.org. You download it, it's free. It's not a large file, it's a very kind of a small file. And then what you now need to do is activate your external tools on Power BI desktop so that it can see DAX Studio. So once you download,
Yeah, right. So once you download, just make sure you open your Power BI down on your system, your Power BI desktop. Just make sure it's opened. If it's opened on your system, then you open your DAX Studio. Immediately you open your DAX Studio, just like I do new here, this thing will pop up. This connect will pop up. And once this connect pop up, all the available DAX Studio you have opened in the Power BI desktop, you have opened in your or on your system will be here. So you can click the drop down and pick the one you like. Even Excel, if you have your Power Pivot model open in Excel, you will also see it here. You see the list of the Power Pivot model here. Then for this one, it's not a tabular server, it's just a Power BI. So I can now select each of the Power BI I want to use, then I'll say connect. Then it's connected.
Yes, excellent. So also, if you could check, go to Power BI Desktop. Let's just show one thing there as well.
Yeah.
So under Power BI Desktop, you would
Yeah.
see, okay, great. So actually, let's see if we can put external tools. So you have external tools. There's an external tool tab that
Yes.
should be
Yeah.
activated. Click that, let's see. But I think there's something else. This will just take you to external tools online. I'm thinking there's an external tool tab you can activate on your Power BI Desktop. So it becomes a tab at the top and then lists out your external tools.
Oh.
So there's a button in the settings that we would need to use to, okay, scroll up here. This will show what how you should activate it. So let's see. If you go to, let me check it for you. Let me quickly get where you can activate your external tool tab. Because if you download Dark Studio, that's an external tool. And Power BI Desktop now allows you to put all the external tools you're using into one tab. Okay, let me open my system, see if I have time to show you. Okay, so this is great information on external tools. So register external tool, external integration architecture. So can you see external tools at the top there? So those are all the external tools available. So I have it on mine. Sometimes I do things I can't even remember how I did them. So we need to activate it on our system. So let's see, view.
Maybe my own Power BI is not updated, because I'm sure it should be under the new features.
Yeah, so
yeah,
so you should have ability to show your external tools. Do you have paginated reports? So all this, every month Power BI gets updated. So under preview reports, you have paginated reports. Okay, you don't have paginated reports at the bottom. That's a new feature that came out just a few weeks ago. Paginated report visual. But the one that allows you to see external tools should be just part of your options for your, almost like in Excel where you have your ribbon where you can change what you see in your ribbon. Okay, we probably will put a short video to show you how to do that. If I share my own screen, you would see how it looks. So maybe I will just do that quickly. You see external tools up here. So I've been installing external tools. I have Tabular Editor, Dark Studio, and then I have Analyze in Excel. There are many external tools. So Dark Studio, if you've installed Dark Studio and you've kind of activated these external tools, then you'll be able to just click Dark Studio from Power BI and it will open Dark Studio. And then that means this data model is open. Now you can also open Dark Studio itself and tell it to look at this data model, or just open Dark Studio from Power BI, and then it's connected to that Power BI directly. So those are the different ways. All right, thanks. Okay, Great.